we must make the most of this life. I
Mhm.
think it takes getting it wrong a few times,
Mhm.
getting hurt, causing some hurts maybe.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it comes back. I think you have to be willing. I liked what you said. It takes a bad meeting
Mhm.
at the
Yeah.
beginning. I think, right. I think you have to fail a few times.
Mhm.
And as you do, you begin to kind of wake up and realize what it feels like to be alive. All right,
Hi.
there we go.
Hi. Hi. So nice to meet
Hi, how are
you.
you?
Very good. How are
Oh,
you?
I'm doing well. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having time today. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be with you today.
I'm a big fan, so I'm following you since a long, long time
Oh,
already, and I love reading your
oh my
posts, and I
gosh.
always share them. So yeah, I'm really
Oh,
grateful.
thank you. I had a chance to check out a few of your interviews on YouTube, and I love seeing you interview people, and you're
Thank
great.
you.
So,
Thank you so much. I'm Anna. I'm Anna Anastasia, so it's the short form of Anastasia. I'm originally from Ukraine. I live in Germany. And
oh, cool.
yeah, and I started this podcast this year, so it's a very fresh one, and it's a fun
Wonderful.
philosophy podcast. The idea is to talk about the philosophy of life, and we talk about it in a light and fun way. So it's something very approachable for people to think about. And I'm working a lot with artists, with creators, with philosophers, with spiritual teachers, and comedians also,
Yeah.
to understand what drives them. And I like to talk to people who are an example when it comes to expressing themselves fully and unapologetically, because I feel that many of us are afraid to express ourselves fully. We are afraid of judgment, and we don't really live our dreams, don't do what we would like to do. And that's why it's so great to have people on board and to talk to people who dare to follow their hearts and to do what they feel they want to do in life.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I think that's so important. And yeah, I love this. This is exactly what I would sign up for.
That's exactly what you are doing. So you're inspiring people with so many beautiful messages, and they
Mm.
are helping me a lot. I guess they're helping many, many people. And I would love to know what your story is, what your background is. How did it all start?
Ah, man, what a long and twisted and sordid tale that probably is. Um, I was just telling someone an old story that I don't think I've told anyone publicly ever. So I think I'll just share it with you. Everybody asks for someone's story, and I think the story is like the well-trod road. It's like an interview story. It's the resume, and so I don't want to give resumes anymore. So I'll give you a story that's a little off the grid.
Yes.
I was 6 years old, and my father was what in the United States they call an evangelical Christian minister, meaning he was a Protestant minister. And we traveled a lot, and he would go from town to town, kind of going from church to church. And so we were in the back seat of a station wagon, seeing all these different sights and cities. And we were in the middle of the American West, a place called Colorado, which is high up in the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah.
I remember being a real little guy, and it was nighttime, and we stopped at a rest stop. And my father was just dog tired, and he needed some sleep. And we had to make it to the next destination by the next day, but he had to get some shut eye, and so he closed his eyes, and everyone else was kind of supposed to also. But I was an excitable little guy, and I kind of uncurled myself from my older brother and older sister who were also in the back seat of the car, and I tiptoed out of the grass onto the grass, and it was kind of this velvety carpet all covered in dew, and the cold that was setting in. And I remember looking up, and, the Rocky Mountains are quite high, quite tall. And in that moment, and I remember it very, very vividly, even though I was young, I remember seeing the starry night, just like Van Gogh painted it. I mean, really.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a swirl. I mean, it was not still. It was living, it was breathing, it was a dragon moving and dancing and pulling me into her belly. And it was such a kaleidoscope of experience that I actually lost my balance in that moment. And as a kid, I fell onto the ground. I fell
Wow.
backwards and I just stared up at the sky in complete and utter hypnotic wonder. And I think that was really the first time I believed in anything like God or the universe or anything more in any intelligible way. Um, and I think that I look back on that moment and I think, my God, that's when you realize there's something bigger than yourself going on. I think that I was privileged to have that thought so young because mostly I think that children are such little narcissists. I mean, we only really believe in ourselves for so long. I have four kids, and I can tell you, even up into their prolonged teenage years, they only really think that they're the only thing that exists. But truthfully, in that moment, I think that I caught this glimpse that there was something more going on than really meets the eye. And I wanted to know, I wanted to understand what was going on. And I think that kind of began this journey for me, to see, to understand that the world is what we can see and taste and touch and hold. And maybe it's also more besides, that there's more going on than meets the eye. And really, I think I look back on that moment, I say, I think that's really where in so many ways it begins for me.
That's so beautiful. And I really love this experience when you figure out that everything's alive.
Yeah.
This is something that we ignore it. It feels like we know it without knowing it. So it kind of feels right to say that, but in our daily life we forget about it. And sometimes for some reason these blindfolders, they disappear, and sometimes you just see it and you realize that everything's alive and that you are just part of something that's so huge. And I find it so beautiful that you had this experience so young, and it just came from exploring, or from being still, probably from stillness and from just watching your environment.
Mm. Yeah, my childhood was sort of peppered with a number of kind of cage rattling kind of moments. I had an even earlier moment, and as you're saying it, I'm calling to mind, perhaps even this fits in that camp of waking up kind of moments.
Mhm.
My grandfather died when I was 3 years old, um, which interestingly enough forms the basis of my very first memories.
Wow.
And
Mhm.
so I remember my grandfather at 3 years old, and I remember our family moving then to be closer to my grandmother after his death. And I remember my father at the foot of his bed, and I remember him sitting there, his head in his hands, and I remember his great shoulders kind of moving up and down, crying. This great man,
Mhm.
this great man in my life, and he was crying early in the mornings. And I remember thinking to myself, I must remember this. I must remember this. I don't know if someone had told me to hold on to memories. I'm sure probably someone had, in the wake of all of those events. I'm sure someone in those moments of death and the
Mhm.
transition from life to death had said, hold on to everything. But of course, I think that was so seared into my child mind. Hold on to this. these moments pass that I can see that moment and I think of my father. Now, skip ahead to this very year. My own father passed, and I see myself at the foot of
Hmm.
my bed, and I see my own head in my hands and my own shoulders up and down, and I say, "Oh my God, the circle of life, right? The
Yeah.
circle of life. How amazing!" Yeah.
Do you believe that we can truly leave?
Mm. Truly leave this lifetime, this universe,
Yes.
this.
Hmm.
Hmm. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm agnostic about the whole thing. I tend to put my emphasis on this one wild and precious life,
Hmm.
even if there's something after this, which honest to God, I hope there is. I really hope so. And probably the older I get, the more I hope there is. Uh, but even if there is, I want to live like there's not.
That's
I want
great.
to live like this is all there is because the more I defer towards the next life or the next three lives or the next five lives, the less importance I place on this life and the more time I think I'll have to get it right. And I think I'd rather apply it to this one where it counts, where it matters. I'd rather love the faces in front of me. I'd rather do all the things, see all the sights. Someone asked me at some point in time, they said, "What would you do if when you died, you woke up and, somebody said, 'Hey, this has all been a video game and sorry, this is it.'" And first of all, I told him, I said, "Well, I'm pretty sure that actually is what's going on. So I wouldn't be
Me
too
too.
surprised." And I said, it would kind of depend on how I played the game. If I had gotten all the coins at all the levels and racked up all the flags like in Super Mario Brothers, I'd feel pretty damn good. On the other hand, if I had left all the coins on all the levels and left all the flags at the bottom, I'd want to play the game again and
Yeah.
again and again. Which is to say, we must make the most of this life. Nietzsche had this really profound concept of eternal recurrence. And I think eternal recurrence, this idea of the repetitiveness of life, repeating life, is a very important concept. And if I could just break down the concept easily, what I would say is, you know, if we think that life only is conducted once, it's very dense. The idea of
Hmm.
onceness is a very dense concept. But actually, even more dense is if we have to repeat something over and over. Let me give you an example. Um, the French Revolution was very sad and sober. But if you talk to a lot of French theorists these days, or even your average French person, I get the idea that they're rather proud of their French Revolution. They kind of like the idea of all the guillotine heads, and it's kind of just trivial. And Robespierre was in the right, and there's kind of a lightness to it. Ah, how delightful! In
Yeah.
other words,
Yeah.
that thing that only happened once. It only happened once in history, and so it kind of feels light. And let's have a French Revolution lark, shall?
Hmm.
But if we had to repeat that French Revolution, say infinitely, I guarantee you they would feel a lot more embarrassed to talk about it. They would be like, "Oh God, Robespierre, what an ass he was." They would feel very embarrassed about it. Or let's change the analogy altogether. If you're a person in a relationship and you cheat once, you might go, "Well, we're willing to forgive him." But if you cheat infinitely over and over and over, it's very heavy. It's very
Yes.
grave. There's a gravity to it. In other words, I want to be very light about this life. It's once, it happens once. And so let me be very light about it.
Yeah.
I'd like to be very light.
I love
Life
that.
happens once and only once. So that's my spin on it.
I love
If that
that.
makes it.
Yes. What's your passion? What drives you the most?
Well, I would say we've come very close to it. It is living this life
Hmm.
fully and deeply. It is being fully and deeply alive. It is falling in love with what is. I want to get to the end of this life and say, he was drunk. He was drunk. he rang the all the wine out of life. He drank it fully and deeply.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
He really lived it.
I think
Yeah.
that I don't. He lived, and I think it's become increasingly important. You know, I look back on a life, and I think I've done that. I think that I've always been pretty concerned about making the most of life.
Hmm.
And it's become increasingly important. I don't want to waste my time trying to please people who you can't please, people who don't see you or people who want to try to change you to be like them. I'm not interested in playing by the
Hmm.
rules of a game that I didn't make or didn't sign up to playing. I want to be unrepentant. I think that more and more that's what I'm passionate about, is
Breaking the
fully
rules
living.
or writing your own rules.
Probably a little bit of that, as much as I can.
Yeah, yeah. I'm reading a lot of like many of your copies, and one of them it was just a capture, so you didn't even have it on a post. It was just one of your captures. It said that you're happy that you didn't try to protect yourself. I think when you met your wife, if I'm correct, because you were like, what if we didn't do this and that? What if we would just pass and if we never talk to each other? And then there was one line that said, what if we prefer to protect ourselves instead, like to protect our hearts? And I found that very interesting because now you say the idea is to live life fully. And from my point of view, it's only possible if you're brave and if you don't protect yourself at all costs. What we as a society, we do that somehow. And I'm wondering why we don't take risks. Do you have a tip how to take more risks and how to lower this self-protection?
Well, I fully wonder if most of us are even fully alive. I think a lot of us just kind of robot along in life like good automatons, kind of
Yeah.
marching from point A to point Z. Um, Here's how I think it goes, if I'm really honest. This last year, my family and I visited a great canyon, like a natural wonder. And I'm going to be honest, I am not a lover of heights. It just, I don't love heights. And
Yeah.
so I got about as close to it as I wanted. I got about as close to it as I dared, and I did, in fact, peer over the edge. But as soon as I peered over the edge, I started to feel a little squeamish in my
Mhm,
stomach, and so
mhm,
I started to tiptoe backwards. I started to have that sense of vertigo, and so I began to tiptoe back, and then I started to have a funny thought about 5 feet back. I started to think to myself, they should put a railing they
mhm,
should put a railing in front of that canyon. It would be a hell of a lot safer if there was a railing in front of that canyon. I'm sure that people have fallen off of that canyon. In fact, I'm sure that a great gust of wind could pick up a guy like me and send me flying off that canyon. They would probably have less lawsuits and less death and a lot less sad people if they just put a railing in, I thought to
mhm.
myself. Well, here's how it works. So they put a railing in front of the canyon. And then pretty soon, a guy standing 5 feet back says, they should put a railing back here because 5 feet just feels a little too close. We should railing 5 feet back. Well, then somebody is going to be standing 5 feet back with the railing there, and he's going to say, I could imagine that somebody coming down the hill crashes through this barrier, goes through the next, and falls off. And so pretty soon, by the end of it all, you're going to be 30 feet back looking through binoculars over the canyon. That's how civilization works because we're all so goddamn terrified that somebody's going to get hurt.
Oh yeah.
So
Mhm.
pretty soon, we avoid the experience as it is. We're all
Yes.
so concerned about one another's safety. Life is hazardous. In fact, what I would actually say is none of us make it out alive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really
Uh,
true.
it's a terminal illness, as Carl Jung said. Life is a terminal illness. It takes out all of us. I believe that as a species, we are walking along with a bit of a blunt force trauma.
Mhm.
The roots of that trauma are probably as old as the species, but I think we're terrified. I think we're quivering in our boots, and I think that civilization is our response to it. I think the control mechanisms for society are our response to our
Yes,
trauma, our collective
interesting.
trauma,
Hmm.
and that we have done our best to organize and shape and control one another to kind of try and force one another into a position where we can avoid the one thing that we can actually guarantee, which is death. And it's not going
Mm,
to work. We can't control one another, or authority one another, or dominate one another, or dictate one another, follow enough rules, or go to enough classes, or take enough yoga instruction, or take enough
mm.
pills, or go to the doctor enough to avoid death. It's coming for all of us. So I would say we start there. I would say we start with the end we don't want to accept and acknowledge that death is coming. And my guess is we'll be a lot happier if we acknowledge it.
Yes, yes, it's very interesting because we kind of don't really talk about that. We talk about it as something scary. Many, many movies handle death as something bad, evil. And this is just our society. There are other societies that have a completely different approach here. So children already get in touch with death within their family, and it's nothing terrible or bad because probably they believe in an afterlife, probably they believe in something completely different again. But in our Western culture, it's something we simply don't talk about. We don't look at it and we are scared of it. And I even remember myself when I was a little child, I was afraid of it. It passed. So I got
Oh,
over
yeah.
it a lot, but it is just something we don't talk about. And that's so interesting that as this must be the root of this problem that keeps us in this survival mode and that tries to increase the self-protection the whole time. And I'm just wondering how to overcome that.
I think that is where we start. I think we start with the deep acknowledgement of it. You talked about other societies. I would advocate that it's probably society is a wonderful word for it. I would argue that society and civilization are two separate things. So, pre civilizational societies
Hmm.
is what I would argue. And so, what I would say is that many pre civilizational societies often start their members with a confrontation of death, whether that was coming of age rituals, whether that was plant medicine journeys or ceremonies. There was often a direct confrontation with one's own mortality. I think of something even as modern as Norse coming of age rituals for boys, which tend to be some of the most brutal in Western culture, even that I can think of, in which they would actually hang the boy until he asphyxiated. He
Oh.
literally thought he was going to die. He thought he had died before they cut him down.
Hmm.
Why? Why was that even necessary? Well, a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons was until we confront a mortality, we'll always be avoiding it. We'll be playing
Mm.
it safe. We'll actually not risk. We'll not dare. We'll always be hedging our bets. Yeah.
Hmm.
We'll be
Oh,
self-serving, self-protecting.
that's very interesting. It applies so well on a basic daily life experience that I make. It's not that dramatic, but I realize a lot because I work in marketing. I have to present stuff very often, and I've realized in my first meeting I used to be tense. So I'm doubting my work somehow. And the second meeting works better. The best case scenario
Mm.
is I fuck up the first one a little bit, at least a little bit. So it goes a bit wrong. So then I'm relaxed because I had the bad experience. I had a bad experience and I'm over it. So the worst thing can happen. It could happen. It happened. And then, like, what else should come? So this is like a very smooth example from daily life somehow. But I think feeling
I
wise,
love that.
so maybe it's
Yeah.
a really, really cool approach to say, oh, fuck it up then. Like have a fuck up and then
I love
overcome
that.
it.
Yeah. I mean, and for many of us, I remember hearing Tom York from Radiohead say that death is kind of like the noise from the refrigerator. If you're ever around like your refrigerator, you forget that it's making noise. But all of a
Yeah.
sudden you tune into it and you're like, oh, actually, that's really strange. There's a
Uh-huh.
buzz in the background at all times. Death is in the background at all times. All you have to do is tune into it. The ancient Stoics had a beautiful concept, memento mori, like meditate
Oh,
on your own death, right? Meditate on it. Let it permeate. I don't think that's a morbid concept at all. I don't think that's a despairing concept. I think that's an important reality. And so I would say start there. I think that one of the greatest travesties that happened in the last 3 years, and we're beginning to see the long range ramifications of it, was that the whole world shut down because it was
oh,
terrified
yes,
of dying.
yes,
It was terrified. It kept us all at home on the couch because it was terrified, scared to death
that's,
of death. Yeah.
yes.
And I even remember the governor of the state of New York at the time, who's been completely discredited since, but raging against COVID, but then turning it and saying it wasn't COVID. He said, "We will conquer you. We will find a cure. We will," and the quote here, "we will conquer you. We will conquer death itself." And I thought, who are you kidding? What's
Mm-hmm.
what's wrong with you? What hubris is this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I think it really reveals a lot. And I've got to tell you, for me, when all of that funny business began, I took my oldest two aside and I said, "Gentlemen, the world is about to change.
Mm-hmm.
The world is about to change." I said, "And henceforth we began living. We began living." And we did. I mean, I've got to tell you, I traveled everywhere fun, everywhere interesting during COVID. I was that guy
Me too.
alone on the plane, traveling everywhere. I mean, there were like three of us on the plane, right? And
Mm.
we were having the best time in all the
Yes.
best locations, and we were high-fiving all our way. And you know what? I don't think it was irresponsible. I had the best time in the world meeting the most wonderful and generous and incredible people, and I don't regret it at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a similar experience. It's not that I was like trying to break the rules, let's say, but there was something within me that was um, I don't want to say rejecting, but it comes pretty close to the feeling that I had. Maybe some sort of rejecting the panic. So I simply didn't
Yeah,
want to
that's great.
panic. And it's not, as you say, it's not like being irresponsible or coughing in my hands. I didn't want to let fear dominate my life. And I didn't feel this fear. So the choice was forcing myself into feeling it, although I didn't. I was looking at it from a
Yeah.
distance somehow, and I didn't get it. Like forcing myself into something I was not, or just living my life, being respectful with everyone else's feeling and understanding that people have to go through that right now, but didn't let it affect my joy, you know? And
That's right.
yeah, and I really like what you said about that we are so scared to death. I just thought we are scared to death, so we don't really live. We don't fully live because we are
That's
scared
right.
to death, and that's really strange. And when you think about it like that, so we are kind of dead
Mm.
already then.
Yeah. I don't mean to paint any great conspiracies, nor do I really actually believe there's any grand cabal benefiting from it. But
Yeah.
I think we would be negligent to say that there aren't beneficiaries of our fear.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think that there are beneficiaries. I think that we are relentlessly being marketed to.
Sure,
And
yeah.
I think that one of the great wisdom teachers of the ages, Jesus, it says of him that he looked at the people and he became sorrowful in his soul, for they were like sheep gone astray without a shepherd. And of course, if you've ever seen sheep without a shepherd, what are they? They're terrified. They're terrified. They're running scared. And what happens? They become prey to all these things. And that
Mhm.
is us. We are like sheep without a shepherd. And so we get fleeced really easily. we Someone comes up and they fleece us. They take off our fleece. Yeah, and they benefit. They benefit. They sell us. And so we've been caught and sold and bought and sold.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I don't believe in one evil force or anything. I think it's
No.
really it's as it is within us, this is how it is around us. So we are scared, terrified, and we do things without brain, and therefore we also have a leadership that acts accordingly. So
Yes.
it's all about self-responsibility. And the moment we wake up and the moment we are more self-aware, our leadership will be more self-aware. That's just how it works. Like if we operate on a higher level, the leadership will be on a high level. Or probably we won't have one. Let's see what happens. But I think the more self-aware we are, the less of another blind person that leads us we will need. It's like, I think it's an Osho quote. He said,
I love
blind
that.
people are leading blind people, and nobody knows where we are going and why. And this is
Mm.
exactly what happens from my perspective. No matter who sets the direction, people are following. And I catch myself very often asking myself, where does it lead? What is the idea? Like I understand the concept within the concept, but when I zoom out, I don't even understand the whole concept at all. It was like that with COVID. It's like that with many other things.
I just want to say right here, I mean, I completely agree. And I don't really believe I'm gonna say something here, which
Sure.
maybe you disagree with, maybe many people disagree with. I don't really believe in evil. I don't. I mean,
Me
I've worked
neither.
with so many people. I have yet to meet a genuinely evil person, but I
Hmm.
but I do believe in ignorance. I
Oh
do
yeah.
believe in
Hmm.
stupidity, mainly because I believe in my own. But I'll tell you, the other day I was in the grocery store. I was in the grocery store,
Hmm.
and I was going. I was going through the aisles, and I was looking for chili. I don't know if in Germany you have chili,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. We love
chili,
chili.
I was looking. Okay, okay, yeah. Well, I was looking for chili, and so I go to the soup aisle, and there's no chili there. So then I go over to the vegetable aisle where the beans are, and there's no chili in the vegetable aisle where the beans are.
Hmm.
So then I ask an attendant. I say, "Where's the chili?" And she says, "It's in the firewood aisle with the fire starter and the campfire goods." And I'm thinking to myself, what in the world? Who in the world did not put the chili in the soup aisle or even in the beans aisle, but put it in the firewood aisle? And then I realized this is the world we live in. This is not a world dominated by evil. This is not a world dominated by some malevolent cabal. This is a world dominated by people who put chili in the campfire aisle. And I'm wandering around lost. And most of us are. Most of us are just trying to find our way around in the grocery store. Yeah. That's what
Yeah,
I think of the world
yeah,
today.
and there might be people who are like conspiracy theorists, so who will say they're changing it all the time on purpose, so you buy more stuff that you don't need.
That's
Right?
probably the truth. And I'm buying the campfire.
Yeah. Why did I bring that? I totally agree. I always say I don't believe in evil, and I have also many friends who say, but it exists and people do evil things. I don't believe it's evil. I believe this is unconsciousness. So I think, or as you said, ignorance. We don't know better, and we act from an unconscious place. So for me, there are like two poles or two parts. It's
Yeah.
unconsciousness, whether unconsciousness or it's connection, or consciousness. And consciousness and connection are like one thing. And the more conscious we are, the more we realize our connection to everything, and that we are all interconnected, and therefore we will never hurt another because it will be like hurting ourselves. And when we are unconscious, we feel separated, and then nothing stops us, so to speak, from hurting another because we think these are two different things and I need to protect myself. And this is what
Mm.
looks so evil, but it kind of isn't, because this is just our perception. We think the other one is evil.
That's right. I mean, what were the final words of Jesus? He says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Forgive
Yes.
them for their ignorance. They
Hmm.
don't know. They don't know what they do." And I think that really is the reality. And I believe that so firmly, that it is the not knowing. And that's what Mary Oliver said. Ours is the not knowing. And so I have to actually sit there and go, mine is the not knowing. How many times have I done something not knowing? And here's the gritty truth. Intention doesn't make excuses for impact, because really the impact can be deplorable. It can, right? Like I can have a very not evil intention
Yeah.
and have a really evil impact. And by that I mean absolutely devastating, unkind, cruel, horrible impact, where it devastates not just one person's life, but many people's lives, even generations of lives.
Hmm. Hmm.
We've seen it. And so that is real. I can see that. I acknowledge that, God, even in my own life. And so I hold that. Intention isn't the same as impact in
Hmm.
both directions. We have to
Yes.
acknowledge that in both directions. And so,
Yeah.
but what we would say is we would also say, just as, just as impact is not the same as intention,
Hmm.
intention is not the same as impact. And so we would have to look at their heart and say, ah, oh, and surely this person did not believe they were doing evil. And that's probably the really gritty part of it, the part that really sticks it to us. Most people I know think they're doing right. That's what's
Sure.
silly about it. I rarely met any person who actually thought they were in the wrong.
Yeah,
That's what's so funny.
most people will believe about themselves that they are good people, and they will be right
Yeah,
because this unconscious part may be smaller than the conscious one, but still we are acting from that. And I think we all do that. So I do that definitely. Even if I
yeah,
think, oh, I increased my consciousness so much, bullshit doesn't matter because in daily life, when I'm zoomed into this experience again, and I'm not all philosophical, but things just happen, life just happens. I can be unconscious.
yeah,
And this unconsciousness, like for me personally, I feel it when I'm upset, when I don't feel good. Because when you're conscious,
yeah.
you're in the moment and you feel amazing. And when you don't and when you
That's
overthink,
right.
then you feel disconnected.
Yeah, I think it takes some hits, you know? I think it takes some trial and error. I
Hmm.
think it takes getting it wrong a few times,
Hmm.
getting hurt, causing some hurts, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
And it comes back. I think you have to be willing. I liked what you said. You know, it takes a bad meeting
Hmm.
at the
Yeah.
beginning. I think, right. I think you have to fail a few times,
Hmm.
and as you do, you begin to kind of wake up and realize what it feels like to be alive. Yeah, that's how I think you come to that place where you go, okay, and now I know what it's like to breathe.
Hmm.
Now I know what it's like to breathe the air and to know what it's like to be in love with life. Yeah.
We need conflict. You're talking a lot about relationships, love relationships in your feed. And one of your posts said that it's very important to have conflict in relationships. Could you explain that a little bit
Yeah.
more?
Well, I think if you avoid conflict, you'll actually avoid being real in
Hmm.
relationships. And if you're always avoiding reality, then you're not having a very real relationship, are you?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and so then you've checked out of the connection.
Hmm.
Um, it takes connecting to have a connection. It takes relating to
Hmm.
be in relationship. And that involves all of us. It involves the mess of us. And two people who are in conflict with one another, and I'm not advocating that we're always in conflict. That
No.
sounds like a disaster. But any real relationship involves the jagged parts of us, the parts that are angular, the parts that don't agree, the parts that don't get along. I think sometimes where it gets sticky is that you get two people who try to be right.
Hmm.
And mostly, I think people are very addicted to looking good and being right, which I think as a species, we are almost programmed to these two things, looking
Hmm.
good and being right. Really, it is kind of, I think, a species wide program that we run to kind of not get kicked off the island, so to speak, to use a survivor metaphor,
Hmm.
right? That we want to show up in a way where everyone likes us
Hmm.
and we do well, and so we try to prove that we're worthwhile and beneficial. So we try to prove our point rather relentlessly to be good and to be right. And in relationship, I think it's no different. And so I think in order to be in connection, we try to often win the argument, win the fight, make sure they know that they're wrong, that we're right, that they need to change their opinion. And this ends up in disaster. And
Hmm.
most of us would rather be, as the old adage goes, we would rather be right than be happy.
Happy.
And I
Yes.
think Right. And relating is really not about being right. It's about being with the right person. It's
Wow.
about actually being with. Yeah. And so that's the important thing, whether we're right or not. It's about being with. And so I think we have to let go of
Mm.
that game of looking good and being right and simply be with.
Be with, I love that. Be with and be real, because this looking good mentality and the idea of being right sounds like being in a survival again, in a survival mode. And when you're in a survival mode, you cannot be connected actually, because it's you against the other. And with means teaming up with another, like relationship is relating, would mean being in a
That's right.
team with someone. And how could you be in a team if you are protecting yourself and if it's just you against the other? So yeah, there's this paradox that we are living every day in our relationships.
It is so peculiar to me. And then we have this very strange thing that I see a lot in relationships, and it is bizarre to me, I have to tell you that sometimes people think the more traumatic the relationship is at the beginning, the more successful it's going to be. You know, it's like, oh, we really, really had all the fights at the beginning, and I'm like, no, that's not a great relationship either, actually. I think that you really do want to build a strong basis of enjoyment at the beginning of a relationship. Get to know them, really enjoy them fully, right? You should enjoy your partner. I think that is one thing that
Yeah.
you'll hear me say over and over, that you do want someone who settles your nervous system. You do
Hmm.
want someone who brings you to a place of ease. I think that warmth is probably the single least valued relational quality.
Hmm.
Warmth. That you should feel a state of warmth or a sense of warmth, not only from your partner, but in yourself
Mm.
in relationship to your partner. That the experience is one of warmth in connection. That is actually what being in relationship, positive relationship is. And if you're always being pulled upon or feeling that sense of coldness or distance, that's taxing your nervous system. Yeah.
Hmm.
And really, you can't sustain that for long. As you said, that's survival mode then.
Yeah, and since this is what many people learn, so just being in survival mode, I think we misinterpret this somehow. So we sometimes fall for these relationships that are very traumatic, that are a lot of back and forth, that are just a fight without any positive aspects. And we think, oh yeah, if we go through that war, then in the end something's waiting for me. And um, yeah, and this is like this reward and punishment treatment that we put upon ourselves, believing that yeah, it will be better somehow. And yeah, I think this tip is very, very important, very valuable, that you say this warmth, that you actually need to feel this.
We turn our relationships into war zones, don't we? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe this warmth is something that's not familiar to everyone. So
Hmm.
what if we didn't
Yeah.
experience it yet? So it could feel a little bit alien to us, you know? If there's suddenly there is a relaxing situation, so maybe people even get scared of that. So they think, oh, something is strange here. So it's so alien. Maybe there's something wrong about that. I better go for the familiar thing where I fight the whole time, where I need to prove myself.
Yeah, I actually think you're very right in this, which should feel good because we're programmed to be right, so that should feel
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
No, no, but I think it's so spot on because the reality is that most of us kind of grow up in this sense of maybe a war zone or
Mm,
dysregulation. We observe dysregulation. We observe kind of those environments often, and so we only really know that.
mm.
And so we seek that. We seek that out. We recreate that. We re-traumatize ourselves over and over and over.
Yes.
How I would argue that we have to judge it is what is the impact on our nervous system.
Hmm.
And so sometimes I would just say, how does it feel in your body? Judge it by its effect in your body. Does it feel good? I mean, really, does it feel good? Does this feel good? I mean, I sometimes just say that to people and it kind of arrests them. Like, they're like, what do
Hmm.
you mean? Now, the ancient Cynics and the ancient Stoics had this really interesting way of viewing the world, which I completely disagree with.
Mhm,
And what they said was there was an equivalency between values and how something felt. Like
mhm,
if it felt good, if it felt good, it should be valuable. And by this I mean that if they were right, it was as good as if they were happy. That actually being right was as good as being happy.
Ah,
Now,
okay.
I think they're totally wrong. I think they're totally wrong. So, what I would say is that how does this feel in your body? Does it feel good? That's happiness.
Mhm, mhm.
How it feels. If you feel good, that's happiness, not if you're right. So,
Yeah.
some people say, well, I'm married, I never cheated, I go to bed on time, I we've been married for 35 years, we had the 3 kids, we're fine, we're fine, we're fine. No, you're not. You're uptight, you're constricted, you scream at each other, you don't like each other,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
cold, you're distant, right? You
Mhm,
feel heavy in your shoulders, you feel tense in your stomach, you're developing all kinds of mystery ailments when you go to the doctor. You're not
mhm,
happy at all. In fact, let's look at your body. I would say there's 3 things that are happening in your body which should be warning signals about your happiness. Do you
mhm.
feel cold in your body? Do you feel tense in your body?
Yeah.
Tense or tight? And do you feel heavy? Those 3 things, if you feel those 3 things, you are out of alignment. Some way, somehow, somewhere, you are out of alignment.
Great
You
tip.
know you're in alignment if you are warm, if you are light, and if you are spacious. That's how you know you're in alignment, those 3 things. So check on that. That's usually a good register in relationship if you're happy.
Powerful. That's great. Thank you. And another question. What is your definition of love?
Oh gosh. That's a hard question. I'm coming out with a book in February where I try my best to not talk about that. Uh, it's a book all on love, love against
Yeah.
time.
T
It's called.
tell
Yeah.
me, yeah.
Yeah, the book is called Love Against Time, and it is a beautiful book all about love and loss and the inevitable march of time and the endurance of the heart against
Mm-hmm.
the impermanence of
Mm-hmm.
our relationships. And I try my best not to define love because love is such a squishy um, subject that is
Interesting.
rather culturally defined. Love is culturally defined often. But
Mm-hmm.
what I would say is that love is often the subjugation of one's own interests
Hmm.
for the good of another. That love is the deferment. I'll change it. I'll use another word. It's the deferment of one's own desires for the greater good of another. It is actually surrendering and saying that I enfold myself into this. Not yours, but ours. Not me, but ours, or we even. It is no longer I, but ours. It is the loss of a self into the sharedness of a withness. And I think that herein is the paradox of love, because there are 2 things that are required in what I have just said. And this is the nature of the book. As soon as I have said what I have said, I have created 3 conditions. First, I have created the need for an I, because an I is essential if you're ever going to surrender the I. The
Yes.
second is a surrendering. And then the third is a we, is an us. And so actually there is a tug of war just as soon as I surrender my I, then I must find it again so I can surrender it again. You see? And so it is this beautiful giving and taking back that happens in love. I must take it back. I must find it again so I can surrender it again. Is the nature of it.
Wow.
And
Oh my God, that's so beautiful. Yes.
And that's why I really believe when we lose ourself in love, we become so frightened. And we
Mm,
often, do all kinds of things like cheat on our lovers or leave or push them away or do these kinds of things because we've lost ourselves somehow and we desperately need to reclaim a sense of self. Well, that's the truth. We do need to reclaim ourselves. We've lost ourselves. We become codependent or become
hmm
over dependent on something. And have to find ourselves again. But the thing is that love requires a strong self in order to lose it again and become enveloped in the we. And then it becomes we have to find a strong we in
Mm.
order to lose the self into it. And so it's a give and a take. It's a paradox. I love that.
It's absolutely beautiful. And there's this saying that you need to love yourself before you can love another one. And I think that now you explained it very well why it is like that. I think that's maybe the best explanation I've ever heard because you need to find yourself. Well, in order to love yourself, you need to find yourself. So you need the sense of I. Otherwise, when you say I love you, who's this I? Who's doing that? Like who's the subject? And I believe that's very beautiful because, as you say, when we love someone and we lose our sense of self because we probably didn't find it yet concretely, so we don't really have this sense developed so well. So we are afraid and we don't really know what happened. But another option would be that we surrender to this love on purpose
Yeah.
because we know what is happening and we know that we cannot lose ourselves anyway. We can just have the feeling that we do. And we have the feeling that we give
Mm,
it up to become a we, but we don't really lose it. It doesn't go anywhere. It just transforms.
that requires consciousness, doesn't it?
hmm Exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
Awakeness.
the more we are aware of our own consciousness and that we are something bigger than our identity, I think, the more we can probably love someone without being terrified all the time and without running away and pushing the other one away. Because there are different theories, even in the spiritual community on the internet, like people who say you need another one to recognize love, which is true. And there are people who say you need to recognize love within yourself, which is also true. But because others are your mirror, so you kind of need both.
Yeah, you really do. You really do. And I believe that you have to have a self and another.
hmm
That both are so true. And without them, we fail. We fall apart over and over and over. I really think that love is such a dance, and that love is a living thing. And I think of love as a living thing. I
hmm
think that love itself is a living thing. Not just that love is the thing between us, but that love itself is alive. And that love has stages of development. That let's say you and I were in relationship together and we meet just as we're meeting now, and let's just say this was the first flourishings of our relationship, and it was so delightful. Oh my God, it's so great to meet you. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, and isn't this wonderful? And what would we say? This would say this the infancy period in which everything is new. We're first exploring it, and then of course we move on to another phase. We would call it like maybe the toddler phase, and then there would be another phase, and then we would be walking, and then we would go on to an adolescent phase, and so on and so forth. And you see eventually we would
Interesting.
move into an adult phase, and our love would take on this continuum. But if you stretch that out far enough, that love would also do what? Well, it would get old, and then it would
Yes.
even die. Yeah.
Love is an own creature, so it becomes an own thing. Oh, that's so
Yeah.
interesting. That's super beautiful to give it a face and to give it a character, because maybe love is also different between each and everyone. So love between different couples can have a different face, like literally
Yeah.
face, and can look completely different.
I love, by the way, the ancient people groups didn't believe in scientific theories the way we assign things. We kind of take out a great deal of the mysteries of life. I think we actually depersonalize our universe. They personalized the
Hmm.
universe. It wasn't that there was thunder and lightning. It was that Thor was throwing hammers
Yeah, yeah.
at the ground.
Hmm.
It was like, and it was like the gods of rain were blessing my crops. There was a personal universe. Sometimes I want to make the universe personal again.
Hmm.
Love is personal. And that's how I feel about this. So when I hear you talking about this, I
Hmm.
kind of think it comes full circle for me that love is very personal. And
Yeah,
love is personified, I think. Yeah, I
that's
love that.
great. You're also doing workshops, right? So I saw that you are having an upcoming one, I think today, if I'm right. Um,
I just had it yesterday, actually. Oh my
Yesterday.
gosh,
Okay, it
yes.
was yesterday. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe you can tell a little bit more about that as well, like about your workshops.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually have ongoing workshops. It's a part of a collective that I lead called The Creators. It's a membership based collective, and it is so phenomenal. It's something I'm deeply passionate about. It's for artists and poets and creators and everyday radicals, journal keepers, and people who simply
Oh.
long to find themselves as the creators of their own story, telling the story of their life in new ways. And I fundamentally believe that we all have the creative spark in us, but sometimes we
Hmm.
get stuck. Sometimes we don't know what to say. Sometimes we lose our footing. And so these are workshops to inspire and ignite our passions. Every
Hmm.
month we take a new look at artists and creators and
Hmm.
poets and writers, and I do a 2 hour workshop, which people get invited to the live red carpet premiere. They can participate in that through
Yeah.
Zoom. It's a phenomenal thing, or they can watch the replay of it. If you're a member, you get to watch all the backlog library of those. And now I think we're going on close to 20 hours of those. So you get all of those. You get the
Wow.
prompts. You get the membership,
Hmm.
and it is an incredible community. I am so blessed to have amazing artists, songwriters, poets, but also just like uh, housewives who are just sitting there like just with their babies and their toddlers in the background feeding. I mean, just like people who are just wanting to create new stories with their life, and this is igniting their passions. Yesterday I
Wow.
did Anthony Bourdain and The Shadow, and
Hmm.
it was a phenomenal workshop. I honestly, there was not a dry eye in that house. We've got over 70 people who are now a part of us and counting. And God, it was awesome. I got to tell you personally, I shared, it was 2 hours solid, and I got to the
Hmm.
end of it, closed my laptop, and I went to sleep. I was just dog tired. It took it all out of me. I feel like after these, I feel like I should leave it all out on the courts. I should leave it all out there. I should be exhausted, wrung out, and I was. So I
Yeah.
did my job. Yeah.
Oh, how great. Yeah, and what do people need to sign up? Actually, it's just possible on your website, right?
Yeah, go to rainierwylde.com, the creators, and sign up and be a part of it. Again, it's an ongoing membership, but they can sign up for one and cancel at any time.
Hmm.
Although I don't think they want to, because it
Hmm.
is just so amazing. It's so fun. It's for the
Yeah,
cost of the same as a few beers, and they can just enjoy it and be a part of us. Yeah.
sounds great.
We would love for you to come be a part of it.
Yeah, I will check it out, definitely. And what did you say when will your book be released?
February 8th,
Oh yeah.
Love Against Time.
Oh, perfect. Will it be available on your website as well, or where can we order?
It will be available on Barnes and Noble, on Amazon, on my
Perfect.
website. You'll see it on Instagram. Yeah, we'll hit all the major sources. Yeah,
Perfect. Yeah, I think
I'm
if I order on
so
Amazon, it will
excited.
deliver to Germany. So I will do that.
Yay. Yeah, please do.
Great. Well,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I thank you. It was an incredible interview, really. Thank you so much. You're really an inspiration.
Yeah, thank you. This has been wonderful. Honestly, you're just such a great interviewer, and this just felt so natural. And
Thank
I've
you.
been on a lot of podcasts, and I can honestly tell you, not every interview is wonderful, and not every interviewer makes you feel natural and at home. And so you are great.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Have a
Bye.
great day. Bye.